Hello, my friends. Welcome to Clay Formations. Today we're going to be sculpting some clay into little Maleficent. I decided to make a smaller version of this character for a friend of mine since that's her favorite character. And it gives me more practice on making something a little smaller. The last project I worked on called The Warrior, The Last Stand, was a little difficult, so I thought I'd try something a little simpler. So what I'm doing here is I'm working the epoxy sculpt into the basic shape of her head. And after this dries, it'll be hard as a rock. Gives me a good solid base to work from. Sort of laying out the layout of her face with the general markings. That nose there is temporary. I just did that so I could get my bearings. Making room for the Carbachon Eyes. You paint the back of the Carbachons, and then you can, when you put them back on the sculpture, you can see through, makes the eyes look more realistic. So now when we put them on the sculpture, you can see through. As I was working on this, I realized that it looked more like Batman than Maleficent. But that'll change in a little bit. I almost think I made the black pupils a little too big. But unfortunately, you can't go back and change it unless you want to tear everything up, and I didn't want to tear everything up, so I said, you know what, that's good enough. Just cleaning up the inside of the eyes there. It's one nice thing about using glass Carbachons or little round steel balls. It makes it a lot easier to sculpt the eyes. Does not, however, make them easier to paint. It's a lot easier to paint the Carbachon. Made the eyes a little too thick there, so I have to scrape them down a bit. I thought maybe I'd give it just a lined texture here. I didn't like it too much, so I decided to change that, but now it's time for the nose. The funny thing about sculpting noses is they're not that difficult to do. They almost sculpt themselves if you just take a little bit of time and just work at it. They just seem to appear. Lips, on the other hand, that's a different story. Lips, ears, hands, and feet. Those are the hard ones. Marking where the mouth should go. And applying the lips. As I stated earlier, lips are very difficult to do, and really all you can do is just add, take away, move, smooth out, and until you get it to look right. And there we go. Not too bad. One thing about Maleficent is the only time she smiles is when something bad's happening. When her evil plans are going well. The rest of the time she's just sort of stoic. Okay, time to move on to the horns and bulking out the rest of the head. Can't get my finger through there, so I had to use a tool. Smoothing it all out with the rake tool. Making sure there's no lumps or uneven parts. The thing with this sculpture is there was very little texture to it. Everything had to be very smooth. Because when I get to the painting lines had to be very clean and very precise. Oh, this part was nerve-wracking. The entire surface was done and I had to make these lines. Whew. Boy, that was tough. I could breathe now. All right, now on to the base. And after I baked it, I forgot that Maleficent had these two side flaring parts that go out from the bottom of her mask. So I had to add that to it with a little bit of Bacon Bond. I had to reinforce them with Epoxy Sculpt later. Okay, right here what I'm doing is I'm adding a square tube so that I could put the arms in. Bulking it out for her body. Covering it with Epoxy Sculpt. What I realized here is that I made the shoulders a little too low, but I was still able to compensate for it when I put the Sculpey on it. I just added more to her shoulders to make it look more balanced. This is her staff. After after I put these on, I realized that I really didn't want the parts to stick out that far. It didn't look right, so I cut them off. There we go. Okay, now on to sculpting the body. See how I bulked up her shoulders a little bit more to make her look more like she had real shoulders. Sometimes it's difficult to get the spatial shape of the inside of the armature. You don't want to add too much because then it's too big when you add the clay. By the way, a tip here, if you have Sculpey that goes down onto wood, make sure that you separate the bottom of the Sculpey from the wood with like a really thin piece of string or wire, because if you don't, the Sculpey will shrink and the thinnest part will attach itself to the wood, and when it shrinks it will crack, guaranteed. I should know because I've done it quite a bit. Not on this one though. Now that we've got the main bulk of the clay on, now we can start adding the details. Flowing robes. By the way, if you've made it this far and you enjoy what you're watching, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and perhaps if you feel like it, like and subscribe so you can see more of my sculptures. I had a lot of fun doing this part of the sculpture. Usually robes are pretty difficult to make, but this one wasn't like that. It came out pretty good without too much effort. Okay, that right there was from start to finish, bulking and completion. All right, let's paint her staff now. After painting it green, I used a color shift, which gives it kind of a glowing effect. Had a hard time filming her hands, so there you go. All right, after it's baked, now we can paint. Start with the base. Trying not to get too much paint on the robe. nicely. Like I said before, the most challenging part of this sculpture was making the clean lines. I really didn't dry brush much. Everything was pretty straightforward. Putting on our eyeshadow. Now to do the little bird. Forget what the bird's name was, but I felt the bird needed to be with her. Angry bird. All right, now let's do the rest of her headdress. Oh, this part was another nerve-wracking part. Painting those little lines where I etched them in earlier. Using a very fine detail brush. We're getting closer. Giving her some lip gloss. Now it's time to attach the head to the body. Then add the bird to the staff, and it's done. Well, friends, that just about wraps it up for another edition of Clay Formations. Thank you so much for watching. I upload a new video the first Saturday of every month. Make sure you stop by and check it out. In the meantime, we'll see you later.